Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Wisdom Works live webinar. I'm Parishi Dua, the moderator for today, and I'm so glad you could all join us for what I know will be a meaningful and important conversation. Today's session is all about psychological safety, understanding what it means, how it shows up in our everyday lives, and why it's so important for developing self-belief and confidence, especially as young people navigating school, friendships, and the world ahead. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker, Juliet Lubbe. Juliet is a business and life coach who works with professionals and leaders across industries, helping them build clear, purpose-driven lives and careers. Over the years, she's seen how many high-achieving adults struggle with self-doubt because they never truly felt safe being themselves when they were younger. That's a big part of why she's so passionate about speaking to young adults today. Juliet brings a grounded and thoughtful approach to everything she does, and we're really lucky to have her with us today. So just before we begin, a quick reminder to please keep your microphones muted throughout the session. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll get to them during the Q&A at the end. With that, I'll hand it over to Juliet. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Parishi, and welcome to everyone. I really do appreciate the time to be here and to spend some of my many years of learning and experience in this space and how it's become so important for me. So I think, Parishi, in order for us to make this work effectively, you obviously have to move on with the presentation, because I don't have, I do have, sorry.
Please just let me know when to change the slide.
Okay, I'm back. We do have bad weather here, and it is possible that we might drop every now and again, and my apologies for that. I'm just trying to get the presentation to work effectively in order for me to actually scroll through it to enable you to see. Parishi, I don't seem to have the control over the presentation.
That's okay, you can just let me know and I'll scroll.
Okay, all right. If you can just go on to the next one so that I can show you, but it's actually not showing up the way it's meant to be showing up at all. It's actually separated all of the various different elements. But you know what? It doesn't matter. And I'll explain to you why, because we're talking about psychological safety, and this is, life always happens in odd ways. Psychological safety is feeling safe even when things go wrong. We talk about physical safety and protecting us from harm of the environment, or any environment that we might find ourselves in that could be an accident or that we could get hurt. But what we don't realize is the psychological safety of what we're thinking about mentally. And that is where we have the sense of confidence, ability, and insight to be able to show up for who we genuinely are, and therefore be able to share how we feel, say what we want, and actually be authentic without the fear of facing judgment or negative consequences. So if you consider what has just happened at the beginning of this webinar, it didn't work as we were hoping it would. So it could make some people feel very, very uncomfortable. It could make people stress and fret about what are the consequences. The consequences are, so it doesn't flow the way I was hoping it would. I will, by the way, send out the presentation for you all to have a look at it. But that's just life. That happens. It doesn't mean that I will show up any differently. Parishi, can you move on, please? Okay. So when we talk about what is psychological safety, the true definition is being yourself without fear of being judged, criticized, or attacked, or any version thereof. And when we talk about real life examples, because we've focused this presentation for the younger folks, I used an example, asking a question in class. I'm sure all of you at some stage have wanted to ask a question, have been nervous to do so, and therefore you don't ask because you're wondering, what will my friends say? What will the rest of the class think? They might think I don't know this stuff. I might show myself up. I think we can all relate in some way, whether you're a parent having to ask a question or a youngster either in school or uni having to ask a question in class and not feeling confident in that. Disagreeing with a friend's another big one. So many youngsters are focusing on trying to understand how we fit in. So disagreeing with a friend and saying, I have a difference of opinion on this, we often don't do because it means that we're then not fitting into the norm as to what we expect them to expect of us. And that can be massive because you're not being authentic. Another one is coming out. When I talk about coming out, I'm not just talking about coming out in terms of what your sexual preferences are. That's only one portion of it, but it's coming out in terms of who you are, how you show up in being you and being authentically you. Saying no to a drink at a party. You know, even I felt this the other day. I had gone out and I had been invited. It was a business dinner, and the individual that I was out with poured me a glass of wine, and I felt at that time, because he'd been raving about this bottle of wine, that I felt that I had to drink it. And then I paused myself and I said, but I don't have to, because I get a choice here and I get to say no. And I actually said, I'm sure it's a wonderful bottle of wine and I really do appreciate you sharing it with me, but I'm actually not drinking at the moment. And he was a little taken aback, but I put my boundary in place. So that was what was important for me. Another one is being neurodivergent or different. Can I tell you something? We are all different in our own special way, but being accepted is what we want to be. Therefore, we put ourselves into compromise situations where we can find that we're actually trying to fit in with the rest of everybody else. And that's not healthy. It's not normal. And then, of course, another one is having a difference of opinion or seeing something from a different perspective. We are all entitled. And psychological safety is being able to do all of those things without fear of being judged or attacked. Parishi, can you move on, please? Thank you. And this is a good one. So why it's so hard to be that? Next one, please, because it's not flowing the way it's supposed to, but that's okay. So we come to the reasons of the fear of exclusion, being excluded, you know, being left out of the crowd, being left out of the class, being left out of the team, being left out of a friend group. And then, of course, the comparison culture, which is massive in today's world. And you add social media to that, it's quite horrific because there's this constant evaluation, you know, of, am I good enough? Look at what they're wearing. Look at what they're driving. Look at what they're studying. And this constant comparison culture, which fosters a terrible amount of insecurity on an ongoing basis. And then perfectionism. And I always ask people, does perfection exist? Well, not in man's world, no. So we strive for unattainable standards, and that in turn leads to self-doubt. So we actually set ourselves up for failure. Parishi, can you move on, please? So we then need to look at the long-term impact of what that actually means and how that ends up with us showing up in the world. Next one, please, Parishi. Okay. And this is why this has become such an important topic for me, because I coach adults. And when I say adults, I actually do coach youngsters. But my primary focus has been in coaching executives, entrepreneurs, teams in business. And the one thing I've come to identify is how many adults never learned to actually speak their piece and how to show up safely. They don't know how to put an opinion forward. They don't know how to share a different viewpoint. They don't know how to approach things in a manner that is going to actually be conducive to a building environment that enables them to demonstrate how they can add so much more value. So what happens? They end up burning out or trying to be perfect to prove their worth. And then they end up employing someone like me as a business and life coach to help them to figure it out. And it's very interesting because there are only two fears that we are born with. And one of them is that we're born with a fear of loud noises. If you think about babies and they hear a loud noise and they'll burst into tears. But even as adults, if you hear a massive bang, you get a fright, you jump. That is one thing we are born with. And the other thing that we are born with is, if you have it, the fear of heights. So you either have a fear of heights or you don't. There's kind of nowhere in between. But you can learn to cope with it. And the reason I'm sharing this is because those are the only two fears that we're actually born with. Everything else is learned behavior. So if we take that into consideration and we can sit back and say, well, if we can then unlearn some of the learned behavior that is not serving us well, surely we should be doing that. And what if we can shift that earlier for you, for example? Parishi, please. Okay, I've realized that this has actually taken out some of the slides, but it doesn't matter. I will adapt. So when we talk about then psychological safety, what does that actually mean in terms of how do we get to that? How do we do that? How do we show up authentically as a youngster, as a young adult, and as an adult? And it's about being able to put ourselves into a place where, even though we are either fearful or anxious or have preconceived ideas about how we may be perceived, we do it anyhow. It's about being a little bit brave every single day. And one of those things is to ask questions, to seek clarity without the fear of ridicule. Because let's face it, we're always thinking that everybody else is looking at us and judging us. And research shows this is not the case, because everybody else is worrying about everybody else looking at them. So it's actually a bit of a vicious circle. Another one is disagreeing with friends, as we talked about earlier, which is you need to be in a safe space to do that. So it's being able to share opinions without the fear of friendship loss, saying, you know what, I like your viewpoint, or I don't like your viewpoint, or I have a difference of opinion, or I totally disagree with you. That's not what my belief is or what my opinion is. But it's being able to have that discussion without the fear of losing the friend because you have a different viewpoint. And then once again, I talk about coming out, and that is once again revealing the true identity of who you are without fear of rejection. That, as I say, it's not about just coming out in terms of your sexual preference, but coming out. So it was actually lovely today. Before I had this, I had a lovely meeting with a client of mine, and we were actually talking exactly about this. We had a bit of a breakthrough with his team, where somebody showed up and actually spoke their truth, and we were all, wow, that's amazing. For the first time we get to see her. And the boss turned around and he made a comment about something, and he said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm such a nerd, but And we said, we love you for the nerd that you are. And he is a nerd, but he's brilliant at what he does, but he fully owns it. So the coming out is about owning who you are. And then once again, setting boundaries, saying no without the fear of social pressure. So being able to say, no, I don't want that drink. No, you want to do drugs? You're welcome. That's your choice. It's not mine. I prefer not to. It's saying no to feeling that you have to go along with a decision that your friends have made. There's so many different examples that we can use, but saying no is about being true to yourself. And then, of course, the neurodivergent. There are so many people who are either on the spectrum or neurodivergent to a point. And you know what? Each and every one of them brings a unique specialty to the world. And the world is now opening more and more to embracing difference and embracing it, realizing that there's so much value that can be provided. And this is where, as individuals, and being able to acknowledge, yes, I'm neurodivergent, I'm ADHD, I'm this, I'm that, not feeling ashamed, but actually saying it with authority. That's what psychological safety can look like. Parishi, if you can move forward, please. So that's all very well and fine. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, saying, but how on earth do we actually do that? Knowing it and saying it. And I'm sure everything I've shared with you so far is nothing you haven't heard before, nothing you're not aware of. But how do we then change it? How do we build the inner safety to feel that we can share it, to feel that we can say what we think, to tell someone, I have a difference of opinion, I don't agree with you. So it starts with, and it's a very simple process, this, if you can feel it, you can heal it. In other words, if you can name the emotion, and remember, it is just a feeling. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling attacked. I'm feeling left out. I'm feeling compromised. It is a feeling, okay? Everything that we feel, we can heal, which means naming it gives it shape. So I am feeling anxious at the moment. I'm feeling nervous because it's not going my way. I'm feeling I'm going to be letting people down. Well, name it, and you can then actually identify what it looks like, and therefore can do something about that. Parishi, next, please. And I love this little diagram, and I think we all know what it's like when we watch a butterfly fluttering around, and we can appreciate the beauty of them, but we forget where they have come from. So we talk about from feeling to power. It's about taking our power back. So it's identifying the unidentified feelings. So, I'm not sure how I feel. I feel overwhelmed. I'm a bit nervous. And can I say this, etc. So when we name it and acknowledge it, and we're able to articulate it or write it down, we then have more control over it. So we give it shape. We define the feeling and understand it. So before we started, and when it wasn't going great, I was going, okay, I can get anxious about this, or I can just accept it for what it is, which is, it's not working. That's fine. We'll make a plan. Then it's about taking action, about developing the strategies to address the emotion. So what does that look like? How do you manage that in terms of how, once I've defined what that feeling is, how do I then take it to manage it more effectively? We identify it, we name it, and then we say, it does not have the power over me because I choose to make the difference. So we start talking about regained power, feeling in control and empowered versus giving our power away. Next one, please, Parishi. Okay. Another one is creating boundaries. How many of us do not put boundaries in place and therefore feel compromised, don't feel safe, do things that we shouldn't be doing, say yes when we should be saying no, say no when we should be saying yes? Creating boundaries, the most important is to create boundaries with ourselves to begin with. So inner safety starts when you start protecting your own peace. Saying no to people, don't be people pleasing. Logging off social media, and this is a big one we are all guilty of. Making the choice to say, I am putting my phone down in 10 minutes time. I'm putting my phone away at 8 o'clock at night. I am not sleeping with my phone by the side of the bed when I wake up in the morning and reach for it first thing. It's giving yourselves permission to rest, to just be. That is where we need to start, is with ourselves, with the inner peace and creating the boundaries. They aren't walls. And this is important to state. Boundaries are like a wall with a door in it and a lock on our side. So we get to choose when we open it and when we lock it. There's access through it all of the time if we so choose. Thanks, Parishi. Yes. So this one is about protecting your peace. Protecting your peace, when you start in a negative, you're lacking safety. Your inner peace is absent. There's nothing there for you. When you start putting your boundaries in place, learning to say no, stopping the people pleasing, logging off your social media, allowing yourself permission to rest, you start accepting yourself. And therefore, you start being true to yourself and you don't betray yourself. So it's a step towards inner safety, finding peace and boundaries that you've achieved, even if it is just one little one a day. And starting with one step to say, today I'm putting my phone away 10 minutes earlier. It could be as simple as that. Parishi, next, please. We do not give ourselves enough care. We are not kind enough to each other. So one of the things about building inner safety is to talk to ourselves like we are someone we care about. You have all, I know factually, at some stage done the should I, shouldn't I, do I, don't I. You're listening to the two different voices, and we got to remember, who do we hear from the most? We hear from ourselves. So the messaging that we give to ourselves constantly is what our brain is going to follow. And our inner voice can either be our biggest fan or it can be our biggest bully. Okay. So this is where we need to start catching that inner critic. We need to start saying, whoa, hold on a second. Not I can't, I can. Not it's impossible, I'm possible. I'm learning, not failing. This is hard, but yes, you know what? I can handle it. Acknowledge the feeling. This is hard, but I can do it. I'm not behind. Guess what, guys? I'm on my own timeline, where we start reframing and talking to ourselves like someone we care about. And often, if you think about your bestie, what good advice would you give to them? We need to start giving to ourselves, most importantly. Next one, please. Thank you. So, I love this diagram. We can all imagine planting a seed and watering it and seeing that little shoot come up and then watering it some more and seeing this beautiful flower grow. And it's exactly the same with us. We need to stop the negative talk because the inner critic is where the negative talk dominates. We need to recognize those critical thoughts, the negative thoughts. So we need to start, hang on, no, that's not true. That's not true. That's what I keep on telling myself. Is it true? Do we know that factually? We don't. So it's a matter of getting the chance to reframe it, challenging negative statements. Somebody says, oh, I can never do that. Well, for as long as you say that you can't, you're right, you won't. But how about believing that it's possible? How about reframing it to say, I would like to be able to. I'm going to work towards doing that. It's a completely different mindset. And in practicing that, we cultivate far more compassionate thoughts for ourselves. And therefore, start practicing inner compassion, positive self-talk. I've worked with a number of different people, and recently I've been working with someone who is on this journey about life is about mindset, in terms of you manifest positive things, you manifest the life you want to live, you manifest how you want to be. A lot easier said than done. If I'm driving down the car as a youngster in a battered old car and I say to myself, I'm driving a fancy Mercedes or BMW, is it fact? No, of course it's not. But can I imagine myself driving that fancy car? Yes, of course I can. And the whole idea is that one day I will get there. It's the same principle as this. It's about taming the voice that says no and allowing it to say yes. Parishi, next one, please. So, another way to do that, and another thing we need to start doing, I referred to it earlier, is to practice little things every day. We call it micro bravery. So, we all face different things every day, things that we know we'll be challenged by, things that we know will be difficult for us. So every time something comes up that's slightly scary, do what you wouldn't usually do. Speak up, ask for help, offer help, set a boundary, so that you are telling yourself by your action, I've got me, I've got this. So it's inner safety is not about not being afraid. We all get afraid. It's about saying, regardless of feeling that fear, which is invariably false evidence appearing real, because we don't know for a fact that it's going to go the way that we think it might, because our default 70% of the time is to think negative thoughts. But when we start saying, I've got this, the confidence is not the absence of fear, it's the trust that you're going to show up anyway. And you do that by creating little changes every single day. Little changes constantly, little changes. Today, I'm going to do this. And you create those non-negotiables so that you set yourself the goals and the tasks to work towards. Parishi, please. Thank you. So building the inner safety, and whether you love frogs or hate frogs, they are quite fascinating because they start as a little gel egg in a pond or a body of water somewhere, and they start to turn into a tadpole. And I'm sure most of you, if not everybody, has seen a tadpole wiggling along. They then grow arms. I mean, how crazy is that? Or legs, for this matter. And they become a frog. From this tiny little thing, they evolve. Building inner safety is about evolving. It's about overcoming your fear, recognizing it, naming it, and challenging it. Doing something slightly scary. I'm not saying if you're scared of heights to go and scale a 100-foot wall without any safety. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, how about stepping up 2 steps to begin with and see how you feel about it? That way, you're starting to realize I am here to prove to myself I've got the self-assurance of me, and therefore the inner safety knowing that we can handle things. Okay. Next, please, Parishi. Sorry, I saw there was a question that came through from Parul, but it wasn't entirely on my screen. I don't know, Varishi, if you can pull that up or if you would prefer me to just wait on that to answer at the end.
Yeah, sure. I think we can answer at the end during the Q&A. I can read it out for you.
Thank you so much. Okay. So when we come to the reality of how do we show up and where do we show up to be authentic, you've got to ask yourself first and foremost, where do we feel safest to be our full self? With no filters, no pressure, no expectation, just our real selves. And it's invariably either with family, but sometimes not the case. It may not be that you have that safe space. It could be with friends. It could be in a work environment. Everybody is different because you need to identify the people who accept you for you, even when you mess up, even when you don't have it all together, even when you don't have the answers. And even when we sometimes get it so wrong that we fall apart. Because the reality is we don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to fix ourselves to be able to fit in, to be worthy, to be accepted. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to wear the right clothes, drive the right car, go to the right places in order to be part of the accepted set. We don't. Imagine if everybody in the world was the same and we all showed up the same. That would be depressing, scary, and downright boring, truth be told. So you don't have to change who you are to belong. Beauty of it is that you get to own who you are. We get to make the choice because our difference is so often what sets us apart for the positive. We get to own who we are. Next week, we're going to be talking through how we get to do that in somewhat more detail. And so one of the challenges I want to leave you with is this week, start thinking about how you show up, noticing the spaces, the places, the people who see you, who hear you, where you feel safe, where you feel strong, and what that feels like to just be you. If it's at home with your family, ask yourself, what would it be like to be in a work or a uni or a school environment where you could be authentically you, where you could show up just as you without fear of judgment? Okay. Parishi, the next one, please. And so this is where I leave it before we open for Q&As. What if your difference is your superpower? We all have value to bring. We all have ways that we contribute in life. We all have differences of opinions, thought process. We all look differently. We all have completely different DNAs. And it doesn't matter what your belief is, but we are all made uniquely. We're made uniquely for a purpose. Therefore, we need to ensure that as we show up in the world, we get to identify what our difference is and say, how cool is that? That's actually my superpower. And next week, we're going to start unpacking what that looks like and how you can then work towards owning it, but still accessing other parts of you that will help you to do that. So I hope that this has been of value. I'm really looking forward to some of the questions. And as I always say to everybody, I don't have all the answers, but I will certainly try to give you feedback on the basis of my viewpoint, my opinion, and my experience. But I really would welcome any queries or questions that there are.
Thank you so much, Juliet, for all the valuable information you shared today. It was really eye-opening, and I think a lot of us really needed to hear that it's okay to protect our peace and to stop apologizing for being different. So you've given us a lot to reflect on, especially about how we can choose self-trust over fear. And I'm sure our audience has a lot of questions for you, so let's get right into them.
Thank you.
As we move on to the Q&A part of the webinar, please type your questions into the chat if you haven't already, and I'll go through them. I think we received one earlier. Okay, one question that's come up is, how do I react when someone challenges my idea or gives me tough feedback?
Okay, how do you react? So remember, the people who are giving you that tough feedback, that is their viewpoint, opinion, or it could be based on fact. The reality is how you respond is your choice in understanding and acknowledging that that is their version, okay? So when you're getting tough feedback, and this often happens in the school or the work environment when maybe you're having an assessment or when you're getting feedback in the workspace and you hear hard things, it's about acknowledging what they are saying and questioning what this then looks like in order for you to show up in a different way. So if somebody challenges you and says, you're not doing a good enough job here, we really uncomfortable, we're disappointed, you haven't done what was expected, you're not meeting our expectations, as an example, it's a matter of saying, I really value and thank you for your feedback. So you acknowledge it. I'd really like to understand where this can change and how you would like me to work with you. Because remember, there are always two sides to it. We cannot ever all take ownership of something. And this is what I teach in teams. It's called extreme ownership. Extreme ownership is where everybody in the team is responsible for everybody showing up to do the best that they can. So when somebody gets negative feedback or a negative comment, it's about what could we also have done to have made a difference for that colleague to show up better. So that's just one side of it. But in terms of responding, acknowledging it, and asking, what does it look like for me to show up the way that you're expecting me to? Heeding them, listening to them, making notes, and asking questions in terms of, can you be specific? In other words, you need clarity. If they're saying this is wrong or that's wrong, unless they are looking at specifics where they can be factual, which is often the case, to say, well, you actually have not achieved the target of 80% that we set you. Why haven't you? This is not good enough. There is always going to be a reason why. It's bringing it down to what have I done or not done, and owning if you haven't done it, but also questioning how they would assist you in terms of making it happen. It's a whole area of discussion that in and of itself could be a whole session, because there's so many ways to address that. But in my experience, it's always been about acknowledging them, because it might be that they're coming to you because they've had pressure from their boss or someone else to say, your people are not performing. Please, will you sort it out and come back to me? So you need to also understand where it's coming from, and therefore what they need to hear and what they need from you in order to fix it. I hope that gives some examples.
Yeah, thank you for that. There was another great question in the chat. Can you please give an example from your own experience when you did something different, not aligned to everyone's expectations?
It's a very good question. There are many. So I think one of the big things was when I was working in corporate, and I was offered a position that everybody said, that's amazing, fantastic, awesome, wonderful. Yeah, that's so great. And I chose not to take it. I chose to decline it. And the reason is because at that time I was practicing self-care. I was told, are you insane? Are you crazy? You're committing career suicide. You can't possibly say no. Are you nuts? I had lots and lots of very negative feedback, even to the point where my boss at the time, who was chairman of the board, actually said, are you sure you're wanting to say no to this? But I was very sure, because I had gone through what it meant to say yes and what I was saying no to. And if I said no, what I was saying yes to. And what I was saying yes to at that stage was peace of mind, not being driven in a company that I did not believe in the values. So the expectation of what I should have been doing versus what I did was completely contrary. And it was by far one of the best decisions I ever made. I did not commit career suicide, but I did change the direction of my career. And it's one of the things that ended up with me doing what I do now. So whilst everybody else was horrified that I would say no, being true to myself and honestly asking myself, I knew what was right. Even though I was fearful, I was scared. But because I had to trust the process in myself and my self-belief, I made the decision, scary though it was.
Thank you for that as well. I think for the final question, I have one of my own. What's one thing you'd tell someone who's scared to speak up?
I had a lovely example today as well, funnily enough. Same client who turned around where the boss said, I'm such a nerd. So with this team, I've been teaching, as I mentioned earlier, extreme ownership. They are a firm of structural engineers. And as you can imagine, as a structural engineer, they can't get things wrong, because it literally, if they get something wrong and a building falls down, it literally means people's lives are at risk. So we're trying to teach them that zero tolerance for errors is what we're working towards. However, it takes time and it takes practice, and the extreme ownership between each of them is about checking in on each other to make sure that they are all taking responsibility of what they are doing. And I give you this backstory because it's important. In this team of 5, there's always been one individual who says very little in a team meeting. But when I meet with her in a one-on-one, she speaks freely and openly. I believe that's because she feels it's a safe space. And today, I challenged them on something that the team had been tasked to do, and they hadn't actually done it according to the CEO and myself, because it had not been communicated. But in actual fact, they had done it. They just had not communicated it. And my comment to them before she spoke up was, guys, I think I can talk for both of us that we're actually quite disappointed that you haven't got to close this out. This is a task that's been on the agenda for quite some time, and we don't seem to be progressing any further. So can we get a timeline that we can agree to? And this individual, who never speaks up, turned around and she said, she put her hand up and she said, I just really have to say, we have worked on it. We have done it. We have agreed in principle. There are a couple of things that we are not in agreement about, but we have done it. So we're feeling a little bit frustrated that you're saying you're disappointed with us. Now, it's interesting because what she wasn't aware of was I knew they had done it. And I had specifically positioned it to see whether anybody would actually turn around and say, but we have done it. And it was a wonderful moment because in her speaking up, she realized the value that she brought by having a voice, because I was able to make the example to say, had you not said anything, you would have felt frustrated, even more so. We would have been frustrated. You would have been disappointed. We would have been disappointed. And yet, you've actually done it. You even have a presentation to present to us. So the only thing that they hadn't done was they hadn't closed the circle and actually said to us, we have done the work. We're not in total agreement about it, but we'd like to present it to you anyway. It was a light bulb moment for her because she realized the response and what it opened in terms of the discussion. It enabled her for the first time to realize if you open up and share how you are feeling, you will always be accepted and you will be able to gain clarity. They had not communicated. That's what it came down to. 99.9% of challenges in life, in work, is about not communicating effectively. And it was one of those moments for me in coaching where I went, hallelujah, light bulb moment. Well done for speaking up, because this is what it means to communicate. And she was fearful to do so. She was scared to do so. And we acknowledged her being brave in the moment to bring it up. Her sense of accomplishment, her sense of, oh, I'm so glad I did that, was tangible. It was so real. So even in the fear, speak your truth. Put it out there. You never know how it's going to be received. And remember, everybody has a viewpoint and opinion. You will never get everybody to agree with you. You will never get everybody to like you. But that's okay. If you're showing up authentically for yourself first and then to others, it will set you up for life to truly be able to speak and use your voice, where too many adults these days don't know how to do that because they are too fearful, because they've never learned how to. So I really encourage you, even when you're scared, even when it feels uncomfortable, even if your heart is beating, do it anyway.
Thank you so much for that, Juliet. Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your expertise and also taking the time to answer everyone's questions. I think this has been such an engaging conversation, and everyone's walking away with something meaningful to reflect on. So we really appreciate you being here. And thank you all for joining as well. Before we
Yes,
wrap up, I
thank
just
you.
want
So I just wanted to say thank you for everyone attending, and thank you. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Thank you. Yeah, before we wrap up, I just wanted to let you all know that this was a part one of a two-part series. And in our next session, we're going to be building on everything we talked about today and going even deeper into how to actually apply these ideas in real situations, like speaking up, setting boundaries, and trusting yourself when it really counts. So we'd love to have you join us again for that conversation too, and more details will be shared soon. If you'd like to attend more webinars like this, please make sure to sign up for our upcoming sessions, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye now.